In this video, we look at an incredibly important topic you may never have heard discussed until now: sequence of returns. Many people plan for the day when they'll quit their full-time job and either work part-time or not work at all. If that's you, you may also have, lurking in the back of your mind, a concern about the possibility of outliving your savings. That can keep you awake at night, because if you live longer than you expect to live, there's a good chance you'll either die in poverty or you'll become a burden to your relatives. You could end up living in low-income senior housing. You might have to buy your groceries with food stamps and stay home and watch reruns of old TV shows all day. Or you might have to move in with your kids and be dependent upon them to buy your food and see that you have decent clothes to wear. Imagine, after such a full life, giving up your independence. It's not a pretty picture. Financial planners and advisors have a name for this risk. They call it longevity risk, the risk of outliving your money. And as our lifespans increase, the risk becomes greater and greater. How can you minimize your longevity risk? How can you arrange your financial affairs so that you're in charge of your own life, so you don't have to reduce your lifestyle or depend on your children? Well, there are 3 proactive steps you can take. The sooner you start, the greater your chance of success. Step 1. Be realistic about how long you're likely to live. Would it surprise you to know that most couples in their mid-60s assume they're going to die on or before their 80th birthday? And most of them are wrong. In most cases, if a couple is healthy at age 65, one or both of them will still be alive at age 90, 10 years longer than they had planned, 10 long years after the money has run out. So step 1 is to plan for a life that lasts longer than you might expect. Planning to live to age 95 or even 100 is more realistic than planning to die before you turn 80. It's far better to pass away with a little left over than to find yourself alive and well with nothing to live on. That's easier to say than it is to do, but unless you're willing to risk a world where you have to choose between buying your food and buying your medicine, or a world where you've become dependent on your relatives, you'll make whatever adjustments are necessary to your spending and savings now to put more aside for those additional 10 to 20 years. Step 2 is to realize the danger of sequence of returns. Sequence of returns refers to the order in which investment returns occur. During the years that you're building your nest egg, you may be able to recover from a few bad years with a few good years later on. But once you've moved to the phase of life where you're living off your nest egg, the situation is quite different. Let's take a look. Imagine that the year is 1969. Neil Armstrong has set foot on the moon, and 350,000 rock and roll fans have attended Woodstock. And suppose you have just received your gold watch and a pat on the back. You've cleaned out your desk and job freedom awaits you. You figure you're all set because you have $500,000 in your retirement account. You plan to withdraw $30,000 each year to help cover your living expenses, and to account for inflation, you'll increase your withdrawal by a modest 3% each year. Well, here's what would happen to you beginning in 1969 if you were to do that, and if you were able to get the same returns as the S&P 500. For the sake of simplicity, we're not going to take into account the fees and expenses associated with your investment. That doesn't mean they won't be significant. It just means you're going to be in trouble even if you don't count them. This is a record of your hypothetical finances from age 65 out to age 90, showing your $500,000 starting amount, your annual withdrawals, the ups and downs of the market, and what you have left at the end of each year, which is what you start with the following year. Look at the bottom line of the chart. There are 2 lessons to learn from these numbers. First, do you see what even modest inflation does to your cost of living when compounded over time? With 3% annual inflation, a lifestyle that cost you $30,000 in 1969 would cost almost $63,000 26 years later. So don't overlook inflation. The second lesson we learned from these numbers has to do with how you made out financially. In this hypothetical example, at age 90, you don't have enough left in your retirement account to get you to April Fool's Day. $19,000 is all you've got. But you're going to need almost $63,000 to get you through the year. You will literally be dead broke. Ouch. Now, why did we pick 1969 as our starting year? For the simple reason that starting in 1969, as measured by the S&P 500, the stock market had 4 down years within the first 10. And down years early in your retirement can cause you real trouble. That's what we mean by an unfortunate sequence of returns. In hindsight, we now know that 1969 was a terrible time to retire. But will the date you plan to retire be any better? How can you possibly know? Now, to show you how important the sequence of returns is, suppose we could magically reverse the order of returns you received in your hypothetical investment account between 1969 and 1994. Instead of losing 8.42% in the first year, let's say that you lose 8.42% in the last year. Instead of gaining 3.98% in the second year, you gain 3.98% in the second to last year, and so forth. In other words, we would keep the exact same gains and losses, but we would experience them in reverse order. So how would things work out for you if you retired with that scenario? Wow! Withdrawing the exact same amount every year, instead of reaching age 90 with $19,000, in this strictly hypothetical scenario, you would have more than $2.5 million in your account. The only difference between these two hypothetical scenarios is the sequence of returns. Same gains and losses over those 26 years, but just in a different order, a different sequence. Do you see how important the sequence of returns is? If the bad years come toward the end of your life, you may be all right. But if they come earlier, you're toast. And nobody can predict the future. But almost no one is talking about sequence of returns. These 3 words, sequence of returns, could very easily cause you to outlive your money. And getting a lousy sequence of returns could be far worse than being forced to retire sooner than you planned, which, by the way, happens more often than you might think. Again, that can cause you to outlive your money. You see, you're hit with a double whammy every time you withdraw money when your account has a loss. Not only are you now pulling out a larger percentage of your nest egg, but you're reducing the likelihood of ever recovering from the loss because you have less money left in your account to put to work for you. So what can you do? The answer comes in step 3. The solution is to draw from your investment accounts when the markets are up, but to draw from some other savings when the markets are down. Well, what other savings? Well, what if a portion of your savings were in an asset that is guaranteed to grow by a larger dollar amount every year? That would certainly give you a favorable sequence of returns, wouldn't it? If you knew the minimum amount your account was going to grow each year, do you think that would help give you financial peace of mind for the rest of your life? But where could you find such a savings vehicle? Right under your nose. It's been around for well over a century, but most financial planners never think to mention it. It's a certain type of life insurance. Dividend-paying whole life insurance has never had a losing year in more than 160 years. How's that for a sequence of returns? Up every year for more than a century. If you have this kind of whole life insurance policy and it's a respectable size, you now have a very smart but very simple strategy available to you to help your money last at least as long as you do. In years when the market is down, you simply live off your insurance policy assets instead of selling investment assets. In down years, leave your regular retirement funds untouched so you can wait for the market to go back up. Let's go back to 1969 once again. It's just like the movie Groundhog Day. Same gold watch, same pat on the back. You have the same $500,000 in your retirement account. And just like before, you plan to withdraw $30,000 each year and increase that by 3% each year. And you have the same lousy sequence of returns that actually occurred starting in 1969. None of these numbers has changed, but this is not Groundhog Day. This time around, you had the foresight to set up the kind of life insurance policy that lets you pull out cash value, income tax-free, by the way, anytime the market has a down year. The kind of policy that helps you have financial peace of mind. So this time, Whenever the market is down, you don't have to shoot yourself in the foot by taking money out of your investment account. You've got a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy you can draw on. So the very first year when your investment account drops 8.42%, you don't touch it. You draw from your life insurance policy instead and leave the money in your investment account to help you recover. The next 3 years, when the market goes up 4%, 14%, 19%, you draw from your investment account, and so on. Look where your investment account would be at age 90 in this hypothetical situation. Instead of running out of money by April Fool's Day, you would have more than $2 million in your retirement account, 4 times as much money as when you started in 1969. And that doesn't even include the cash value remaining in your life insurance policy. You wouldn't be reduced to living in low-cost housing, watching television all day, living on cat food. And you wouldn't have to surrender your independence. Instead, you could remain independent, and you could enjoy a comfortable lifestyle. You could leave a generous legacy. Your family and your favorite charities would be forever grateful to you. You could even leave $100,000 for the care and feeding of that darn cat. The only difference between that awful scenario and the wonderful scenario are you plan for a longer life, you recognize the danger of an unfavorable sequence of returns, and you did something about it before you retired. You purchased a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy to carry you through the tough times and to help you leave your legacy for the world. As you plan for your retirement, be sure you don't underestimate the risk of sequence of returns. It's a factor that can mean the difference between poverty and happiness in your senior years.